There is a good reason the framers of the Constitution wrote the press into the First Amendment, because democracy can't thrive without an informed middle-class electorate. In a democratic republic, the institutions of democracy are imperiled by a lack of balanced national debate on issues of critical importance. As both Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia learned, a steady radio drumbeat of a single viewpoint from one polar end of the political spectrum is not healthy for democracy when opposing voices are marginalized. We've previously spoken on the importance of progress over regress. Progress is anything that helps through government policy, the middle class, and thus democracy. Regress is anything that helps through government policy, almost always under the ruse of wanting less government, the top of the socioeconomic hierarchy, and screws everyone else. And there's also usually a corollary between progress and regress, which is that progress is truthful while regress lies. Regress extends across the red cult and sadly into the corporate Dems. So, bummer to have to reveal this, but pretty much all of legacy media, and even much of large new media, is either partially regressive at best, or mainly fully retrograde regressive as their middle, or at worst, full-on fascist with a soup of lies of every breath being propaganda, which we'll detail later in this series. That's right, the more retrograde aspects of legacy media actually want fascism, which is characterized by authoritarian and dictatorial power, suppression of political opposition, and often includes elements of course, racism and militarism. Fash movements typically seek to create a centralized, oligarchic-run, autocratic government led by a dictatorial leader, often promoting aggressive and expansionist foreign policies, and is basically the most extreme form of right-wing, being really wrong-wing ideology. Proactive progress, which is primarily structured in classical liberalizing, meaning divesting from narrow views or prejudices, think human beings are foundationally good, and thus works to enact policies which speak on behalf of all elements of society, starting with the middle class and hopefully having compassion for the poor to become part of that middle class, and have a society which is structured to allow them to do so, while also acknowledging that the rich are doing perfectly fine and thus need the least help. Yet the American empire and its media is primarily controlled by a staggeringly small amount of the aristocracy. There have been historically around 1,500 regressive commercial radio stations and around 900 imperial religious nonprofit stations, almost all blasting out wrong-wing regressive messaging 24/7. Sinclair Broadcasting, who are ultra buddies with the serial lying recidivist orange criminal con man, owns and controls more than 190 local news stations across the country, and had sought to become even more dominant by taking over Tribune Media before the FCC actually did its job and blocked their monopoly from becoming even more so. And in terms of corporate media nightly news broadcasting, there are now really only 6 companies: Disney, CBS, General Electric, News Corp, Time Warner, and Viacom, and all of them run through 3 dark imperial agencies called the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission, and that shouldn't even be considered a conspiratorial thing to say. As a result, they all promote a very top-down set of narrow views and prejudices which are foundationally anti-democratic. Regressive reactionaries have essentially found a way to hide within conservatism because conservatism has historically defended and protected hierarchy, and also been amplified with an underlying foundation in religious patriarchal hierarchy, which historically through most of the dark ages of recent times was via kings, dictators, and other forms of totalitarians, and made slightly better in the last couple centuries by slightly watered down versions of those same things called robber barons, who are now called billionaires who happen to own media companies. Almost everything you see from legacy media and even much of new media, composed of social media companies, generally algorithmically amplifies punching down and never up. So the problem is always based in fear and terror broadcasts from Muslim countries, or dirty brown immigrants into Europe or the US, or black in black crime in inner cities, etc. And then anything into the culture war of distractions of whatever we don't like, we blanketly label woke. Never mind any of the crimes of the crooks on Wall Street, or within big banking, big business, or corporate big religion, and even within big science, such as big pharma, big ag, big oil, and all of their heavy lobbying. We, on the other hand, aim to do the same thing a real journalist does, which is to punch up and not down. Setting aside the shrill and nonsensical efforts of those who suggest that corporate oligarchic-owned media in America is somehow liberal, the situation with regard to talk radio is even more perplexing, as it doesn't even carry a pretense of political balance, having a near complete blackout on progressive voices. Progress doesn't see the same algorithmic amplification of its messages that Regress does on modern social media platforms either. And apologists for these platforms will argue that's because algorithms are designed to promote emotional content, and the wrong are more likely to create inflammatory content. The reality is that corporate media have proven that when left to their own devices, they value responsibility to their shareholders higher than social responsibility to inform the electorate about controversial issues of public importance. As corporate media doesn't really care about covering real issues of importance to the public, let alone covering those issues honestly or objectively. So we highly, highly recommend you turn off, if you even still watch, any form of legacy media. Since our documentaries can take years to make, these insights were created with the goal of us being in front of camera, providing you more consistent content. They are independently made and often feel for us like throwing a Kleenex into the Grand Canyon alone while surrounded by tumbleweeds. So if you find value in these shorter insights, please do the usual things that favor the ghost in the machine algorithms. We never run any ads, so also consider navigating over to our overarching website, nilesheckman.org, where you can acquire our longer form content such as our films or narrated essays bundled in volumes, or even become an annual member for a very modest fee. Cheers for watching and/or listening.